Hello again, it's Miss Mary here, and this is going to be a lecture on fluid and electrolyte balance for anatomy and physiology. So let's rock and roll, okay? So fluids and electrolytes. You have fluids moving through your body all day long, every minute, every second, okay? Moving in cells, out of cells, bringing nutrients, getting rid of waste. And all of these processes are going on at the same time, not even aware of them. And you need that to maintain homeostasis, okay? In other words, to maintain stability in your body. You have intracellular fluid, you have extracellular fluid, you have some intravascular fluid, your plasma, right? And interstitial fluid, right? I'm going to show you a nice little chart that breaks it down, okay? Most of your body is intracellular fluid. It's about 65%, okay? The 35% that's left is broken up. It's extracellular fluid. It's interstitial fluid. That's the fluid that's kind of inside your tissues. The plasma, part of your blood, lymph, and transcellular fluid. What's that? In your joints, synovial fluid in your joints, cerebrospinal fluid, vitreous and aqueous humors in your eye, right? Digestive secretions, all those things are transcellular fluids. And collectively, those are all the extracellular fluids, okay? Intracellular fluid is inside the cell membrane. Extracellular is outside the cell. Intracellular, mostly potassium. Extracellular, mostly sodium. Make sure you know that. Okay. Very important. What do we need? What kind of fluid do we need? So normally an average healthy adult needs about 2,500 to 3,500 milliliters of water a day. And we get that usually, hopefully we do, by drinking water. Our cells make some water. That's metabolic water, just through byproducts of the reactions of the processes that are going on. And then we lose fluid. We lose fluid when we urinate through our kidneys. We lose fluid in our stool through our intestines. We lose fluid through our skin when we sweat. And we even lose a small amount of fluid when we exhale. Right? Expired air has some fluid in it. Okay. So sensible and insensible loss. So I want to make sure that you're familiar with those two terms. Sensible loss is the fluid that you lose that's measurable. We can measure your urine, right? We can measure vomit, right? There's fluid loss through vomit, that kind of thing. Insensible loss is the loss that's not measurable. It's going to be real hard for me to measure your sweat, right? Vaginal secretions. So just know the difference between sensible and insensible loss. And know the term euvolemic. EU in front of a word as a prefix means normal. Normal body fluid volume, euvolemic. Okay? All right. So 50 to 60% of our total body weight, water, fluids, right? And it's not just water, it's water with other things like glucose and amino acids and electrolytes and stuff in it. And then you've got intracellular fluid, about 2/3 of it's intracellular and about 1/3 is extracellular, like we said when I showed you the pie chart. Well, how does the body regulate that? Extracellular fluid regulation, well, in your brain, you have the hypothalamus gland. The hypothalamus gland is kind of like, it's the temperature thermoregulator of the body in addition to a lot of other things. But there's a thirst center that will make you feel thirsty. Salivation or decreases and your mouth will get dry and you'll go, oh, thirsty, right? And I'm going to go through the antidiuretic hormone and vasopressin and all that a little bit later in this lecture. So I'm going to skip over that right now. How do we increase fluid intake? What mechanisms do we have? Well, we're outside working, we're sweating. Physical changes stimulate the thirst center in the hypothalamus. Your mouth gets dry, you're thirsty, you drink some water. All right? There's this whole thing that goes on with these different mechanisms. The body's amazing in what it can do. Okay? When your body water starts to go down, like you're outside working and you're sweating, your blood pressure is going to drop. When your blood pressure drops, sodium concentration rises. It's called dilutional hypernatremia. And the osmolarity of the blood increases. And all of these things together triggers mechanisms to say to you, drink, drink, drink something. Okay. For a normal, average, healthy adult. Older folks don't have that, not me, but other old folks. They don't have the same kind of thirst mechanism, right? Kind of slows down. So we sometimes have to remind them, hey, did you drink any water today? Have a drink. Okay. Because they can get dehydrated very quickly. And if we need to hang on to fluid or decrease the amount of fluid that we get rid of, same thing, whatever physical changes stimulate that hypothalamus. And that stimulates the posterior pituitary to secrete this thing called antidiuretic hormone, also known as vasopressin. Antidiuretic hormone, think about it. If a diuretic makes you pee, an antidiuretic makes you not pee, right? So the antidiuretic tells the kidneys, well, reabsorb water, don't make as much urine. And your body slows down getting rid of fluid until you either go drink some water or things get corrected in the body. Pretty amazing. Okay. So what can cause disorders of fluid balance? You can have fluid volume problems. You could have fluid concentration problems. And then you can have a problem with how the fluid is distributed in the body. Okay. So let's talk about deficiency of fluid. Don't confuse hypovolemia with dehydration. Okay. Hypovolemia or volume depletion is a loss of water and sodium, okay, or a loss of blood. You get stabbed and you're losing volume, fluid volume, okay? You're losing everything. Dehydration is when you're getting rid of more water than sodium, like you're outside running around in the heat or working in the heat and you're sweating. The water, you're getting rid of the water by sweating, but you're getting rid of more water than sodium. So they're two very different things. Know the difference between those two things. Okay. Here's the mechanism with dehydration. And it's pretty, again, fascinating. So you're sweating, you're losing fluid, water through your pores. Okay. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from your bloodstream. Where did the water get into your bloodstream from? From your tissues. And where did the water get to your tissues? From your cells. So the water shifts from your cells to your tissues, from your tissues to your blood, from your blood to your sweat glands, and then boom, out. And now you're dehydrated. Okay, pretty fascinating. So now on the other hand, you can have fluid excess. The kidneys will usually, again, if you're a healthy adult, the kidneys will usually compensate, right? But there is one thing that's very dangerous, and it's called water intoxication. Yes, that's a real thing. So with water intoxication, if you are consuming a huge, excessive amount of water, or if you're losing fluid, right? Heavy losses of water and sodium, you just replace it with just water. What's going to happen is the amount of sodium in your extracellular fluid is going to go down, which is going to change. The osmosis is going to make the fluid move into the cells. The cells are going to explode, and then you are going to die. Right. And that's a fact. I'll tell you a quick story. There was a radio station years ago that had some contest to see who could drink the most water in the shortest period of time. And the lady that won died. True story. So that is a thing, water intoxication. You don't want to do that. Okay. Complications include pulmonary edema or cerebral edema. Pulmonary edema is fluid in the lungs, basically drowning. Cerebral edema is fluid on the brain, increases intracranial pressure because your skull's not going to give if there's too much fluid in there. And again, it can be fatal. Okay. Fluid accumulation like edema. That's when fluid is gathering in the interstitial space, right? So the tissue, like under the skin, and it gets swollen. If you've ever seen somebody who's like feet, ankles, and lower extremities are kind of blown up, right? That's edema. So that's fluid in a specific area of the body. Usually you see that with congestive heart failure, right-sided heart failure. All right, let's talk about the electrolytes. Sodium. Main electrolyte in extracellular fluid. And sodium determines how much water you have, right? And where it goes in your body. Remember this, water follows salt. Water follows salt. Don't go eating Chinese food. And I'm not hating on Asians. I love Chinese food, but it tends to be kind of salty. You eat it, You feel like it's very salty, and then you drink a lot of water saying, well, flush it out. Nope. Nope. Going to hang on to the salt, hang on to the water. Okay. You're going to wind up with edema. Water follows salt. Sodium imbalances. What can go wrong? Hypernatremia is when you have too much sodium in your blood, higher than 145. And that's usually if your sodium is high, it's because you don't have enough fluid. Usually if you're healthy, it'll self-correct by making you thirsty and you'll drink some water and then you'll be fine. Hyponatremia, sodium levels lower than 135. That is usually from excess body water. In other words, you're hanging on to so much fluid that now your sodium is low compared to how much fluid you're hanging on to. Okay. Usually get the kidneys kicking, moving, and getting the fluid out of your body. It'll correct. Potassium, queen mother. Potassium is the queen mother of the electrolytes, okay? If you have either hyper or hypokalemia, high or low potassium, you're going to have a heart attack. Yeah. So hyperkalemia, higher than 5, the level in your blood of potassium, it's going to make your nerve cells and muscle cells irritable and jumpy, right? And the myocardium is the muscle around your heart that makes your heart pump, and nerves have to make it pump. And so if the nerve cells get irritable, it's going to go, you're going to have a heart attack. Hypokalemia, less than 3.5 level of potassium in your blood, can happen because of too many diuretics, water pills, vomiting, chronic diarrhea. Just the opposite. Your cells are going to get less excitable. They're going to get sluggish, right? They're going to start getting sluggish. You can have a heart attack, okay? So potassium imbalances are dangerous, okay? Very, very dangerous. Calcium. I mean, they're not good to have a calcium imbalance, but calcium levels should be somewhere between 8 and 10, okay? Hypercalcemia, greater than 10, can be because of hyperparathyroidism or hypothyroidism, or if your body's in a state of alkalosis. Your parathyroids are these like 4 little gland, teeny tiny little things on your thyroid gland that control calcitonin, the hormone that controls how much calcium is in your bone and how much calcium is in your blood. Okay. So parathyroid's hyperactive, screws it up, and too much calcium goes into your bloodstream. Okay. It affects the nerves, mostly the nerves. Calcium and magnesium. When you think potassium and sodium, you think muscle. When you think calcium and magnesium, you think nerves. So it inhibits depolarization of the nerves. In other words, it makes the nerves sluggish. Hypocalcemia, now your calcium is too low, can increase the excitation of the nerves, make them jumpy. Okay. So not great, not great. You want everything to be in a homeostatic kind of state, right? Everything needs to be perfectly balanced. Okay. Now let's talk about acid-base balance. Okay. What is an acid? An acid is the potential of hydrogen. It's how many hydrogen ions are concentrated in a certain solution. When we look at the chart here, the levels of the hydrogen, if you see a lower number like a 0, that is hydrochloric acid. That is the strongest type of acid that exists. And that is the acid that will basically eat up a human body. Okay. That's a 0. You see stomach acid is somewhere between a 1 and somewhere around a 4. Urine's a little acidic, between a 5 and a 6. Our blood, 7.35 to 7.45. That is a narrow little window, right? And then the higher the numbers go, starts to get more alkalotic. So, your intestines are usually somewhere between an 8 and a 10. Respiratory secretions, 11 to a 13, give or take. Okay. So right here in the middle is neutral. This way is acidic, and to the right is alkalotic. Okay. So let's talk about that more. Why is that important? Well, that influences the body's stability, the homeostasis. And even a little deviation one way or the other can kill you, right? Can be fatal. So remember, the pH of blood, 7.35 to 7.45, the N, same at every lab. everywhere, okay? Does not change. So we have these things called buffers. Our body, parts of our body control that acid-base balance. Your lungs control carbon dioxide, which is an acid. Your kidneys control bicarbonate, which is an alkaline, okay? So your lungs and your kidneys, respiratory and urinary systems basically are the buffers that control and balance the acid-base balance of your blood, okay? Well, what can go wrong? You have chemoreceptors in your brain, in the brainstem, and if your pH starts to drop because you have too much carbon dioxide, it signals the respiratory center to do something called Kussmaul's respirations. The depth and rate of your respirations will increase. So you'll start to breathe. Why? It's a compensatory mechanism. Body's amazing. Your body is getting rid of carbon dioxide to try to get the acid-base balance where it belongs. Get rid of carbon dioxide. We're trying to get rid of an acid so that we get us back into a stable acid balance. Okay? Amazing. And that happens quick, by the way. Your lungs will quickly jump in to try to fix things. Now, your kidneys are in control of the bicarbonate. Okay? This is the more powerful of the two systems, but it's also slow. It can take the kidneys 24 to 72 hours to try to fix a problem that you have. And frankly, in 24 to 72 hours, you could already be dead. So, but the kidneys are in charge of the bicarbonate, the HCO3 negative. Okay. So, and I'm going to try to explain this a little bit more. When we look at arterial blood gases, ABGs, okay, we're looking at them to determine if somebody is in an acid-base imbalance. An imbalance is going to be either respiratory or it's going to be metabolic. In other words, the problem's going to be with the carbon dioxide being too high or too low, or the bicarbonate being too high or too low. Let me explain. Okay? And there's an easy way to remember this, a really, really easy way to remember this, okay? It's called Rome. And it's not just because I'm Italian, but it means, respiratory, opposite, metabolic, equal. Okay. When you look at ABGs, pH is low, CO2 is high, respiratory acidosis. Metabolic, pH is low, bicarb is low, metabolic acidosis. Okay. Respiratory opposite, metabolic equal. See what I mean? And even on the other side, for alkalosis, pH is up, CO2 is down, respiratory alkalosis. See, they're the opposite. Metabolic, pH is up, carb is up, metabolic equal, metabolic alkalosis. And what I am going to do here is I'm going to insert what the ABGs, the normal ABG readings are, or what they should be. Okay, so I'm going to stick a little text box in here like this. Okay, so the pH of the blood should always be 7.35 to 7.45. And again, very little wiggle room. The partial pressure of CO2, that's what that stands for, should be 35 to 45. See how the numbers kind of look the same? That's how you memorize them. The bicarbonate, which is the HCO3 negative, should be 22 to 26. And the partial pressure of oxygen should be 80 to 100. Those are normal ABGs, and they are the same at every lab in every country in the world, right? Period, end of story. So ABGs, there you go. So now you've got what the norms are. You're welcome. Okay, now, let's move on. Okay. Acid-base imbalances. Well, why do people have problems like this? So, from a respiratory perspective, people that have emphysema, COPD, pneumonia, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, where there's a problem with the expansion of the chest, these people wind up dying because they go into respiratory acidosis. They retain CO2. Okay. Metabolically, the most common reason for metabolic acidosis is diabetic ketoacidosis. All right. And that's a long story that we'll get to when we get to the endocrine system. Also, some drugs, if you take too many aspirin, which is very acidic, that can mess with the acid-base balance. And if you have chronic diarrhea, and it has to be for a while, you lose a lot of bicarbonate that way, and that can cause a metabolic acidosis. On the other hand, why would somebody become alkalotic or go into alkalosis? Hyperventilating. So that's where Kussmaul's respirations were fast and deep. Hyperventilation is shallow and fast. You blow off too much CO2, guess what? You're going to wind up in respiratory alkalosis. And then metabolically, if you lose a lot of gastric juices, like you're vomiting, or this happens with older folks sometimes, excessive use of bicarbs, antacids, Tums, Rolaids, that kind of stuff. You got to follow the directions. You can't take the whole bottle. You can't eat them like they're candy. Okay. Old folks will sometimes take too many of them. And the next thing you know, they're in a state of metabolic alkalosis. Okay. So these are some of the reasons. Here is the Rome method for figuring out ABGs. Remember, respiratory opposite, metabolic equal. Okay. So when you're trying to figure out ABGs, look at the pH first. Is it high or is it low? If it's low, it's acidic. If it's high, it's alkalotic. Is it respiratory or metabolic? Look at the CO2 and the bicarb and look to see, is it the respiratory opposite or metabolic equal? And that'll tell you what kind of, imbalance they're in. Very easy. This, my friends, is the renin, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, aldosterone, antidiuretic hormone system that is going on in your kidneys all the time. Right? It's not just your kidneys. If your lungs are involved, it's this complex system. Again, the body's amazing. It's amazing. And this is one of the ways that your blood pressure is controlled. Okay. So you have two kidneys, and above each kidney, you have an adrenal gland. Okay. You have something called angiotensinogen that is made from the release of renin coming from the kidneys and the adrenals. Angiotensinogen turns into angiotensin 1. Your lungs make angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE. They send it to the kidneys and they let angiotensin 1 convert to angiotensin 2, which then triggers aldosterone to be released from the adrenals, which triggers the release of vasopressin, also known as ADH or antidiuretic hormone. That makes you kind of not pee, hang on to a little bit of fluid, blood pressure goes up. You hang on to fluid, blood pressure's up. You get rid of fluid, blood pressure's down. Okay. So this system is going on between your lungs and your kidneys all the time. Okay. The medications that we use to treat high blood pressure, go one slide ahead. These are strictly antihypertensive meds. ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, right? These are the prils, lisinopril, enalapril, captopril. Okay. They treat hypertension by stopping ACE right here. They stop this whole process right here. Angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. So they don't let angiotensin 1 turn into angiotensin 2. So you never wind up making antidiuretic hormone and you pee a little bit more and your blood pressure comes down. Right? Then we have ARBs, angiotensin 2 receptor blockers. These are the sartans, losartan, valsartan. They stop the process here. Angiotensin 2 receptor blockers. So when angiotensin 2 is made and goes to the receptor sites, it blocks it. So aldosterone doesn't get stimulated to be produced and you don't make antidiuretic hormone, yada, yada, yada. Same outcome, just it stops it at a different level. And then the third drug, eplerenone, which works on aldosterone. What does it do? It stops it here so that you don't make antidiuretic hormones. So all three of those classifications of drugs have the same end game result, okay? You don't make ADH. And so your blood pressure comes down a wee bit, All right. So that was kind of more than an A&P lecture. So you're welcome, but it's laying the groundwork for when we get into pharm and cardiovascular and all that fun stuff. Okay. So don't need to understand all of this completely just yet, but just kind of, I wanted to touch on it so you at least have heard it before. Okay. Now, transport of fluid in the body. This is going to be quick. Osmosis and red blood cells. Okay. There are three different types of solutions. Isotonic solution is what is in our bodies. Normal solution, right? It's like salt water. Okay. See the little blue dots are the solute that's in the water, right? So you see there's kind of an even amount. And then there's your little red blood cell all happy. Okay. Normal solution. Hypotonic solutions are more dilute. They have less of these little solutes in them. Okay. Because they're more dilute, osmosis forces the fluid to move into the cell, which will make the cell get bigger and bigger and boom, explode, which is called hemolysis. Okay. That's what a hypotonic solution will do. A hypertonic solution is a more concentrated. Look at all those little blue dots. Look at all those solutes. Okay. The opposite happens. It'll pull fluid out of the cell and the cell will shrink and shrivel up. It's called crenation. Right. So why do you need to know this? Let me tell you. Okay. That's just another chart that kind of shows you. You do need to know what these fluids are. So isotonic, iso means equal. Isotonic solution is the same concentration as what we have in our bodies. So if I give you normal saline in an IV, no fluids moving anywhere. I'm just replenishing fluid usually. Hypotonic, hypo is below or low. So there's a lower concentration, makes the water move into the cell. Hypertonic, more concentrated, makes the water, pulls the water out of the cell, which makes the cell shrivel up and shrink. Okay. So make sure you understand isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic. Okay. I'm going to give you some examples of what they're used for. If you are dehydrated, I'm probably going to give you a hypotonic solution. Also, if you're in DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, hypotonic solution. Hypertonic solutions are usually used, postoperatively, to stabilize blood pressure and urine output and reduce the chance of someone developing edema. Isotonic solutions just replace fluid, right? We give them because you maybe got stabbed and you're losing fluid. So here, have some normal saline to kind of replace what you lost. We give saline with blood transfusions and also hydration to promote, good renal function, your kidneys. So that's why we would use isotonic solutions. And here, I want you to familiarize yourself with some common IV solutions. Okay. And just like everything else in medicine, we're going to give a lot of different names to the same thing just to confuse you. No, I don't know why they do it, but they do it. Saline, salt water, 0.9% sodium chloride, 0.9% NS, 0.9% NSS. It's all the same thing. It's normal saline. It's what we have in our bodies. Or you could have half normal saline, 0.45% sodium chloride, half NSS, half NaCl, all means the same thing, half normal saline, okay? Or you could have dextrose, which is sugar, right? Form of sugar. You could have D5W, 5% dextrose in water. You could have D10W, 10% dextrose in water. Or you could even have D5.5. D5.5 normal saline, which is 5% dextrose in half normal saline, or 0.45% normal saline. Okay. And then lactated ringers. Lactated ringers is an isotonic solution. So is the normal saline. Okay. Just FYI. Electrolytes. Okay. We're going to talk about electrolytes. You don't need to know all of them, but you need to know sodium, potassium, and calcium, and magnesium. And you need to know about the bicarb. Here's a nice little chart with the electrolytes and their values. Sodium, 135 to 145, potassium, 3.5 to 5, calcium, 8 to 10, and mag, 1.5 to 2.5. The bicarb, like I said in the ABGs, 22 to 26. Okay. And how do fluids move in the body? You know, you don't really need to understand completely passive transport, active transport. Passive transport is where there's not anything physically making it move other than concentration gradients, right? Active transport is where we can move something against concentration and against pressure. It's like somebody or something pushing something, okay? So osmosis, with osmosis, the fluid is going to travel to wherever the concentration of higher solute is, okay? With diffusion, and you're going to see that the solutes in the fluid, high solute concentration, low solute concentration, diffusion is going to try to equal it out. Osmosis is going to move to the higher area, okay? And I'm not even going to get into passive transport with osmosis within the arteries or the venules. I'm going to skip ahead to risk for fluid and electrolyte imbalances. Infants, just remember, the very old and the very young are the very fragile. Infants have more body fluid than we do. They can lose extracellular fluid more easily than intracellular fluid, and they have little teeny tiny little baby kidneys that are immature. They're at a high risk for quickly going into an electrolyte imbalance, right? Old people, not me, other old people, right? Intracellular fluid levels will decrease. Thirst sensation declines as they get older. Muscle tissue turns to fat. Medications are involved that can cause loss of fluids and electrolytes, circulatory problems, kidney problems, heart problems, all these things. The elderly, high risk for fluid and electrolyte imbalances. Just be aware. Homeostasis. Homeo means similar or stable. Stasis means still. Homeostasis is this series of mechanisms or processes that are going on every second of every minute of every day inside your body that you're completely unaware of, that are keeping everything on the inside equal and balanced when stuff is changing on the outside all the time. Okay, that's what homeostasis is. It's amazing. It's amazing. There are two types of ways that our body responds to changes, and they're called feedback loops. There's positive feedback and there's negative feedback. Now, most of the systems in our body work on negative feedback. Negative feedback means that there's a stimulus and there's a response that goes against the stimulus. Example, you're outside and it's cold. Your hypothalamus goes, uh-oh, start to shiver to make some heat. Then you get too hot, start to sweat to cool down. Once you get to a normal temperature, either the shivering or the sweating stops. Negative feedback, right? If you're cold, we need to make you warm. If you're warm, we need to make you cool. Opposites, right? That's negative feedback. Another example of negative feedback, blood sugar. You go eat a cheesecake. Shouldn't eat a whole cheesecake, but let's say you do. Blood sugar is now high. Sugar in your blood is high. The pancreas says, uh-oh, blood sugar's high. We need to get the sugar out of the blood and to the cells. So it releases insulin. Insulin gets the sugar, feeds it to the cells, and your blood sugar goes down. Later on, you haven't eaten for hours and hours and hours for whatever reason, your blood sugar levels start to drop and you start to get a little dizzy, a little lightheaded. Your pancreas will secrete glucagon, and that'll release stored glucose from your liver back into your bloodstream. Opposite. Blood sugar's low, we send some in to bring it back up. Blood sugar's too high, send insulin to bring it down. Opposites, right? Pretty easy. That's negative feedback. Positive feedback, not as common, but it happens, is where whatever the initial stimulus is, something happens to make it more profound, okay? The two best examples are blood clotting and having a baby. What do I mean? Let me show you, okay? I'm going to do the baby first. When you're delivering a baby, the baby's head is pressing on the cervix. That's making your body release oxytocin. Oxytocin triggers your uterus to contract more, which pushes the baby down on the cervix more, which triggers more oxytocin, which triggers more contractions, right? That's positive feedback. The one thing, it's going round and round and make more of the same thing keep happening until you have the baby. Okay. Blood clotting. You get a cut. Okay. A substance gets released that triggers platelets. Come here, help. Platelets go stick to the area. They release chemicals, more platelets come. They release chemicals, more platelets come, and a plug forms like a scab. And then this series of reactions happens with other things, that messages that get signals and scan out. And protein, fibrin, comes and wraps around it. And that's how it scabs and you don't bleed to death. Okay. The more fibrin, the more platelets. The more platelets, the more fibrin. The more fibrin, the more platelets. And that's how you clot. All right. Positive feedback. Pretty easy. Make sure you understand that. And believe it or not, that's the end. The end. All right, guys. It's been fun. Love, peace, chicken grease. Until next time. That's fluids, electrolytes, and such. I'll see you. Bye.